All right, here we are almost at Election Day 2024. I want to give you in this video 4 reasons why you should vote. Now, some of you may have already voted this year. There's a lot of early voting going on. Some of you may be putting off till Election Day, like I do, kind of like a holiday for me. I enjoy going down and actually doing it on the day, even sometimes standing in line. But some of you may be saying, I'm not going to vote. Maybe you're saying, look, I'm a Christian and Christianity and politics aren't supposed to mesh together. So, what I want to ask you who are not going to vote is why? Why are you not going to vote? I'm going to give you 4 reasons, and I think there's a lot of others that we could talk about too. But 4 reasons I just want to share with you why I think, especially as a Christian, that you should vote. But before we get to that, I understand that politics are often very divisive. Maybe that's why some people stay away because I don't want to get into this divisiveness. You might have friends who disagree with you politically, and you think, we shouldn't talk about some of these things because we don't want to cause divisiveness in the body of Christ. We want everything to be all about unity. We need to learn to we need to agree to disagree, right? You hear about that. So, in one sense, I'll buy that. In one sense, because we can have friends who see things differently politically than we do, even if you're all Christians. There are some things I don't have any idea how a Christian can vote for. And by the way, if you haven't already watched my video that I put out, um, look it up on my channel. Can a Christian vote for the Democrat platform? So if you want to know what's actually in the Democrat platform this year, you need to watch that video or read it for yourself, which should actually be better if you can stomach it. But you can have even Christian friends who might disagree with this. But so you might say, I really don't want to get involved in all this because we want to have unity in the body of Christ. We want to have unity. Let's just go along and get along and everything. But one thing I think we need to remember is that politics is not about unity. Our goal in politics, especially as Christians, is to do what is right and to be what's right. It's not about all of us getting together. What if our ancestors, especially here in the United States of America, what if our ancestors were all about unity? What if they just wanted to be quiet when, they didn't agree with the way things were going and they just wanted to get along? There wouldn't be in America today. America is built on people seeing things differently politically than other people and standing up and fighting for what's right. Now, fighting for what's right is going to take a different view, different ways. We're not talking about any kind of violence in this situation today where we are, but we need to stand up and talk about things. It doesn't mean that every conversation needs to be a fight. You might have people that you disagree with. That's fine. Family members, friends. You can argue with them. You can talk with them, but you don't hate them. Okay, that's the difference. But we have to speak up because things that have been moved over into the political world are very, very important to our lives, and they're worth a fight. Some of these things, some things that I would call political, we can disagree on, and it's fine. I can say, okay, I see it this way, you see it that way, whatever. But there are some things that have been moved into the political realm that are not actually political. And we need to speak up on those because those are issues of right and wrong, of morality versus immorality. So we as Christians cannot be quiet about these things. We need to speak up. And one of the ways that we can speak up is by actually going and voting and the voting booth. Okay. So I'm going to give you now 4 thoughts, 4 things to think of. And again, there could be probably so many others, but 4 reasons that I hope will drive Christians to the polls to vote. Now, if you haven't registered to vote, it's too late. But if you have, but you're saying, I just, I don't want to go down there and do it, you need to go down there and do it. Okay. 4 reasons. Number one reason, the government is God's business. Sometimes we want to separate. We have church and we have government, and they shouldn't go together. Well, isn't that what our nation was built on? No, it isn't. You need to understand your history a little better. Our government is part of our government is built on the government staying out of churches. That's what the whole separation of church and state, which really isn't even a technically correct, but that's for another video. The idea is that church is not supposed to be infiltrated by the government. And so it's not like we need to keep these all completely separate. But sometimes we think, God has authority in the church. God tells us what to teach in the church. And we'll even give God our family. God can tell me how to run things in my family. But God shouldn't be involved in government in any way. Well, wait a minute. Who set up government in the first place? That's God. God owns everything. He owns government. He set it up. Why in the world would we say, I don't want to bring God's morality and God's teaching into government? How in the world could a Christian say that? It's really naive to be nice. If you think about it that way. God set up a government, it's his business. We need to take his principles in it. And when we see things in the government that need to be changed, and we have an opportunity to have a voice in that change by going to the ballot box, we need to do it. Okay. Number one, the government is God's business. Number two, if we keep it to ourselves, it won't be long before that is the only way we can keep it. In other words, if there are things that I believe are right because God says they're right and they're wrong, if I'm just quiet and I just keep it to myself, pretty soon that's going to be the only way I can keep it. Pretty soon I will only be able to believe it in my head and I won't be able to do anything about it. I won't be able to have any action. How many of you would like to live in a country like North Korea where you're not able to go out and speak? They might tell you maybe, and I haven't seen their official documentation or whatever. I don't keep up with North Korea so much, but they might say, well, you can believe whatever you want. You just can't act on it, right? You can't act on it. Oh, even believe, you can believe whatever. You just can't tell anybody about it. You can't act on it. Well, what kind of a country is that? If we don't get active in our political process, our government very well could, and this is not weird, crazy conspiracy theory stuff. This is reality. Our government could say, you can believe that. You just can't try to influence other people about that. You can't talk about that. You can't change the way you live. Especially when you start talking about things that might hurt somebody else's feelings. In case you haven't noticed, our society is full of a bunch of wimps. Everything is an offense. You just saying something that somebody doesn't like suddenly is you're offending me, or this is hate speech. Everything today can be labeled hate speech. Even the gospel message can be labeled hate speech. But you say, now, wait a minute, hang on a minute here. We are Americans. We have the First Amendment, right? We can speak what we want to speak. I am afraid that often Christians put too much trust in the First Amendment. The problem with the First Amendment is that any law, and this is part of our Constitution, any law is only as good as those who enforce it. So we can have the First Amendment, and they can say that we have the freedom of speech. Hey, you can speak and say what you want to say. But if we have people in government that say you have the freedom of speech, except for when it comes to this, suddenly we can lose freedoms. Now, we all understand that there are limitations to any freedom. For example, I think we would all agree that if I went out to a local park with a loudspeaker, set it up, and I announced to everybody who was in the park that this Friday night, we are all going to go down to a gay bar in town, and we're going to wait till all the people are in there, and then we're going to blow it up. Most people, I think, would say, you know what? That's inciting violence. That's inciting danger for people. And so your freedom of speech does not give you the ability to do that. I think we're all going to agree with that. But the question that we have here is, who decides what we say is hate speech or not hate speech? We all would agree. Let's go down there and blow up that, that gay bar or even an abortion clinic or whatever. That we should not be going and announcing that we're going to hurt somebody. Let's get people together. That would not be within our freedom of speech. Well, what if somebody would say, well, speaking against people who want to have abortions? Well, you're not allowed to do that. What about speaking against gays and homosexuals? What about not allowing them into your membership? What about telling people publicly on an internet channel, YouTube channel or something, or from your church, you're telling people that, the homosexual lifestyle is sin. Now you're offending people. Now that's hate speech. So can you see how far this goes? You can believe it all you want. I mean, you can believe what God said about marriage all you want, but don't tell anybody. That's where conversion therapy comes in. If you've ever heard of conversion therapy, and that's conversion therapy is the idea that if you are a boy and you come to me and you tell me that you're a girl, and I try to tell you, no, look, you understand that you're actually a boy. You're physically a boy. You're a boy. You just feel like you're a girl. Let's change what you're thinking, not change your body. That is conversion therapy. And people try to make that illegal. Some places it is illegal. And I could see it coming even in the United States of America. And so we say, well, we have freedom of speech. We can say what we want to say, but that only goes so far. And who decides where that line is? That's where politics come in. That's where the government comes in. The government puts we elect leaders, and sometime we elect judges, and sometime the people we elect appoint judges. How all this goes, and all this comes down to who is going to actually make these decisions about what we can say, what we can't say. One thing we need to understand also is that our First Amendment, we need to understand this, and our government leaders need to understand this, that rights, our First Amendment does not give us the right to free speech. It recognizes that right. That's something we need to understand about all of our rights. If we keep out of politics and people get into politics who might think that the government actually provides these rights, we need to find people who will understand that our rights are given to us by God, and our Constitution actually just recognizes those rights. If we vote people into office who believe that the government is the one who provides the rights, guess what? We are going to lose rights. And then we're going to sit back. We're going to say, well, wait a minute here. Whatever happened to our freedom of speech? Whatever happened to freedom of the press? Whatever happened to gun rights? What do we happen to all these things that are written there in our Constitution? And people are going to say, well, they're still there. They're still there, except for they only go so far. Okay, if you're going to have Christian hate speech, I'm sorry, you can't say that anymore. You can't say that stuff from the pulpit. We're going to shut you down. We're going to take your building. All these kind of things. It's very, very possible. It could happen, and I think it probably will happen across the board. It has happened certain places in the United States already. So if we don't go out and stand up for what's right and do something as simple as voting for people who have the right view of the Constitution, a right view of morals, especially on the national scale, then it's going to be our fault. Um, Maybe you know some about the Iron Curtain back in Russia when Russia was closed down and communist. There wasn't freedom. There was not freedom. Well, you say there were churches. Yeah, there were churches. There was the official church, right, which is not a gospel promoting endeavor. But there were Baptist churches. But in these Baptist churches, and I was actually in one when I was there in 1990, 97, I was in a Baptist church there, which it was a lot better at that point, but had been there through communism. But many of the people did not trust the Baptist church because there had been informers during the Iron Curtain. So you could go, you could do it, but somebody's always watching. Do we want that in the United States of America? How do we keep from it? We keep from it by keeping people in office who don't want to see that happen. And I think we have some people that are running for offices today that would like to see that happen because they want to shut down Christian speech. They want us not to be able to say what we believe. So if this is number two, if we keep things to ourselves, I'm not going to speak up. I'm not going to say anything. Pretty soon, the only way we'll be able to act on our belief is to believe it in our head. We're not going to be able to act on it. We're not going to be able to talk about it anymore. That's why I need to go out and vote. The third reason that you should vote is the law is a teacher. When we put politicians in office, they are involved often in the making of laws or the enforcing of laws. So I'm talking about any law. I'm not just talking about the Old Testament law with a capital L. The people we vote for are responsible for the laws. And what happens when laws are made, people begin to think that things are right and wrong based on the laws. That's why we say that the law is a teacher. People will say, okay, this is the law, so that must be what's right. Now, abortion is a great example. In 1973, the Supreme Court ruled in Roe versus Wade. Basically, people say that abortion became the law of the land. Now, if you really understand it, the courts don't make law; the courts interpret law. But it was just understood that, hey, the court said, basically abortion is okay. And so what happens 51 years later? What do people say? People say, well, abortion, we need to return it to the law of the land. And what happened in those 51 years? Why are there so many people who think that abortion is right? In fact, today the talk is we need to restore abortion rights. When did abortion become a right? Well, through the 50 or so years of Roe versus Wade being what is understood as the correct interpretation of the law, people just begin to believe it. Oh, it must be. Now they've taken this right away from us. So when we put politicians in office and they make laws, people begin to look at those laws over time and think, without knowingly thinking so sometime, they begin to think, well, what's in those laws is right. That's why we need to have people that will make laws that would be actually correct, because those laws will be teaching people Morality, they'll be teaching them what's right and wrong. Politicians understand this, by the way. That's why they use slogans. They don't want to get up there and give a whole long list about why they believe what they believe. They keep repeating little things. They want you to remember that little thing. They want you to remember this is the party of joy, and that's all you got to know. Or Trump is a felon, or something. They just want to plant those little things in your head without thinking deeply about what they understand, which is why I made that video about the Democrat platform. Can a Christian vote for the Democrat platform? You need to go back and watch that one. All right, let's go to number 4. Number 4 reason why you should vote. And this is it. Silence is consent. If you don't speak up, you are consenting to what's going on. You're part of the problem. Some Christians will not vote in these elections and they'll complain, well, I can't believe how bad this world has got. Well, guess what? It is your stinking fault. If you didn't go down there and have a say, if you didn't go down there and actually vote for somebody who is closer to the truth, nobody's going to be right. Nobody's going to be perfect. You have to understand that. But if you don't go down there and vote for the one that's closest to what's right, even if they're both very far from right, it is your own fault. You say, well, I go down and I vote, but my vote doesn't change anything. No, but at least you have the right to complain, right? Don't do nothing and then say, you know what? I don't like what's going on. I don't want to hear it. Nobody wants to hear it because it's your own fault. And by the way, don't ever think that your vote doesn't matter. We've seen the stories about, things change based on one vote. How many people does it take to say, my vote doesn't count, and so I'm not even going to show up? How many people need to do that before your vote really did matter? And you never know. It could come down. Something could come down to one vote. So voting is so crucial. Now, this is not, you're not going to open your Bible and say, you need to vote in the 2024 election and this who you need to vote for. It's not quite that clear. Just last week, I heard a preacher say that his statement was something like this: in the next couple of weeks, you are going to hear more about an election than you are about Jesus. I get his point. His point is that as Christians, our whole goal isn't politics. Now, some Christians go into politics, and that's obviously the focus of their life. But as a pastor and as a church member, the goal isn't politics. The goal is you got to preach Jesus. But here's the problem that I think maybe was underlying that thought a little bit. Yeah, that's true. We need to be preaching Jesus, not government, not politics. But if we don't take the opportunity when we can to stand up and say, you know what, we want to keep government recognition of these freedoms. We want people in office that are going to be closest to moral correctness than the other people. If we don't stand up and do that, our preaching of the gospel is going to be even harder. That doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. It just means it's going to be very, very hard. Because we can be put in jail for things. Well, that won't happen. Well, it sure happened in the New Testament, happens many places in the world, and even just standing up for what's right. Think of Jack Phillips. Think of her name slips me right now, but I have her in my book. About she was the flower, lady making flowers. She wouldn't make them for gay wedding, and ended up pretty much giving up her business. Just on and on these things because these people wanted to stand up for what is right. So go out there and vote. Number 1, the government is God's business. Number 2, if we keep things to ourselves, it won't be long before that's the only way that we can keep it. We won't be able to share. We won't be able to stand up for what's right. Number 3, the law is a teacher. Put people in place that will make laws that are as godly as possible. Number 4, silence is consent. To put it shortly, if you don't go out and have a say, if you don't go out and vote, I do not want to hear your opinion about what's going on in the world. Kind of hard, but that's exactly the way it is. Well, I hope that helps. If you haven't voted, get out there and vote, and I will see you next time. God bless.